Welcome to Search for Signs. My name is Gary Willing. If this information interests you, please press the like and subscribe button and press the bell for notifications. Now, this next part of the story is hands down the most uncomfortable part for me to talk about. And I'll tell you why in a bit. But it's the impending stock market crash. And in a lot of ways, it's not even impending. It's really the continuation of the stock market crash, because it started in the late 80s, and when Maitreya made the prediction that was published before it happened, so it's not after the fact, it actually happened before, and it was published in Share International magazine. Benjamin Creme was the publisher at that time, and he said that the stock markets around the world were going to start to crash, and at the time they were at an all-time high, which now we would look at it and go, that's nothing, right? Compared to, what it is now, right? But back then they were all-time highs. And he said it would start in Japan. And at the time, the Nikkei index, which is a lot like the Dow for the United States, right, was at about 50,000 points. And not long after he made the prediction, it started to go down and down and down and down and down and down and down, to where it lost about 85%, I think, of its value. So in a lot of ways, it did crash just like that. Now, was it a full-blown depression where people, like in, circa 1920s here in the United States? No. But from a certain perspective, it did crash, and it did cause a great deal of suffering in Japan as a result, right? Now, it also, he also said that there was a strong possibility that, and he called them the forces of evil, were going to prop it back up and keep it propped up for as long as possible. And that's, of course, what happened in the 90s, because we started having this boom, right? And then you had the dot-com bubble. And it seems like when the banks or the men of money and the forces of evil and so however you want to look at it, right? Whenever they need to have a boom, it's like all of a sudden all this money is available. Well, the money's all made up. It's not. They didn't have to go out and work for it, right? They just print more money and then throw it into the system, and whoop, then they have a booming economy for a little while. And then when it starts to go down, well, then they'll try to throw more money at it, right? It's just kind of the nature of the way the economies work. And it's kept the system up for a long time. Now, back in, 2007, 2008, of course, the Dow started taking a really big hit, and it went way down. And that was the first time in my life that I saw people who were upper middle class really suffering. And I had family members who had great jobs and lost those jobs. They almost lost their homes. The stress that they were living under was immense for them, right? I'm surprised that I had a job. I kept my job throughout the whole thing, but I did notice that my pocketbook was getting thinner because there wasn't as much money to go around, right? Now, that's kind of the external or the easy way of looking at the way the economies have been going over my lifetime, right? Over the last few generations, right? But from a certain point of view, the stock markets have been crashing all along, because the current generation that we're living in today, I'd be willing to bet you that their parents and their grandparents had a better quality of life than they had, that they're having today. And so, looking at the way that my parents lived, right, and they weren't rich, they were middle class folks living in the United States and so forth. They couldn't jet set to Europe whenever they wanted, but they had a quality of life that was, I think, better than most people have today. The cost of food was less, the cost of gasoline was less, the cost of Medicare and Medicaid and insurance, of course, was way less. The cost to send your kids to college was less and so forth. Clothing was less and so forth. So, but yet they made a decent wage, and they had a way of affording those things. And it seems like now people are making more money, but everything costs more. So of course, you're kind of more in the hole than you were back then. And so that's just another perspective on I think, on the economy, right? But now, I will say this, is that right when, Benjamin Creme, like I'd been saying, had been telling everybody that the stock markets were going to take a real serious nosedive, right? And then when they started to do it in 2007, his master did say that there was a strong possibility that they were going to get propped back up and go into even higher highs and all-time highs and so forth, which of course it did not long after that. But he said the end result of it would be, if it does follow that pattern, that it would eventually be even worse than it was back in 2007 and 2008. So that's the reason why this conversation is always very difficult for me to talk about when I talk about Maitreya and what's going on today and so forth, because it's going to be uncomfortable for a large segment of society, and probably including myself, right? So I don't really like to talk about it from that standpoint, because I'm not a fearmonger. I don't like to, it doesn't give me any satisfaction to talk about something that could be potentially painful for people. Now, the good news is that if what Maitreya is saying is true, then it's going to bring humanity to its senses. So in that way, it's probably not that bad of an thing to have happen, right? It's just going to be really uncomfortable for a while. Now, the other thing too that I don't like talking about this is because I feel like when you live in the United States, and I remember even talking to Benjamin Creme about this when I was around him when he was alive, but that in a lot of ways, especially in the United States, you can't really separate yourself from capitalism and commercialization. I mean, if you work for a company that's a publicly traded company, for instance, which I have, and I don't work for a publicly traded company now, but I have in the past, I'm contributing to the system by going to work every day. Now, I need to go to work, I need to have a job, I need to make a living and all that kind of stuff. So, but yet I feel like I'm just as guilty as a stock trader on the New York Stock Exchange. Not to mention now I have a 401k, which I'm kind of being forced to do it by the company that I work for, but at the same time, I'm contributing to that same system that Maitreya is saying is evil. And so I don't feel like I have a way to get out of it, right, and go live in the woods somewhere. I guess I could go live off the grid, but that's just not my style. So, how do you live life in the modern world, right, and not contribute to it? So that's really where it's kind of uncomfortable for me to talk about, because I feel like I'm guilty of it too, right? But the way that the masters see all this going down is, again, it's going to prop up and prop up and prop up like it's doing right now, and it's going to go whew, bam. Now, from a certain perspective, that's what the masters see is happening, right? From an economist perspective, they might say, well, that's natural because, every 5 or 6, 7 years, there should be a recession. That's just healthy. And they like to use that term recession, or now they use the word, they coined the phrase, the downturn in the economy, right? Well, from the master's point of view, it hasn't been a downturn. It was crashing. And then this is all a part of the death throes of that ancient system that was built on nothing more than greed and corruption. And the masters and Maitreya know that the way forward for humanity is to not follow those structures, because those structures are based in the past. The future, the structures that we will see economically, will be based on cooperation, brotherhood, and synthesis. But, and as always, take action. Help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos. Have a great day.